Your body is superpowered. Do you have something different than us? I don't have a question. I just wanted to say, 2,000 years ago, someone special left this world. Today he has returned. On your old costume, the eagle's beak was pointing up. Now it's pointing down. Is there a reason for this, please? Have you reinvented the superhero genre by taking man to the stars? Well, I mustn't take all the credit. Sherman and Lomas here did very useful backup work. I had a question for the cult. Is there anything you're not capable of? Well, Marshal, let me answer that by adapting a line of John Wayne's. Just give me a good cause and there ain't nothing I can lick. Nothing? Nothing. Well, public spirit, can you travel back in time? Well, no, but have you discovered Atlantis? I think you're coming at this from the wrong angle. Can you move the Earth out of its orbit? Don't be ridiculous. Alright. Do you have any super animal or insect senses? Now, look, what about moving through solid objects? Control the elements? I was not designed to. What have we got left? Psychic powers, teleportation, metamorphosis. This is out. You must at least have X-ray vision. Not exactly, but. Well, can you read this? Now push him while he's on the ropes. Is it true your first fiancée, Virago, drowned? Yes, but I failed to see. And you were with her at the time? The truth of the matter is. That's what I want to find out. She fell into the sea during a storm. I failed to reach her in time. Our greatest superhero couldn't carry out a simple sea rescue? I searched for her for hours. It was a terrible tragedy. A very convenient one. Because if she'd lived, you could have never gone on the star mission. Because when you returned, she would have been twice your age. The storm caused a magnetic irregularity, which must have affected her flying. Only her body was never found to check. I'm not sure what you're insinuating, Marshal. But I loved Virago. If I'd wanted to go on that mission so badly, I could have simply broken off our engagement. And still have been selected. Not if she was carrying your child. First appeared in the beautiful year of 1987 by Pat Mills and Kevin O'Neill and published under Marvel's imprint Epic Comics, Marshal Law was a 6-issue storyline following the character superhero policeman aka Cape Catcher Marshal Law in the futuristic San Francisco San Futuro. Keeping the law uphold, as superheroes and superhero gangs ravage the city and try to solve the murder of the girls dressing up as superheroine Celeste. Marshal Law, with its initial release, became a very controversial comic book for portraying superheroes in such vulgar and quite frankly, insulting way by parodying iconic house heroes of both DC and Marvel. So much so that one comic book store in Texas has banned the comic off its shelf after one of the characters of the comic kicked a child to Santa Monica. But it didn't stop Pat and Kevin from continuing working on Marshal Law, and as well as commercial success, that they have continued working on him forward, as they also publish under Marvel Crime and Punishment, Marshal Law Takes Manhattan, and later in a monthly magazine Toxic, the storyline of Kingdom of the Blind and the Hateful Dead. Later wrap up the story with Super Babylon and Secret Tribunal under Dark Horse Comics. But even after wrapping up his story, Marshal Law still had attention, as there's been countless offers to Pat and Kevin to create a movie or a TV show, to the point that a Hollywood agency pitched the movie to the Warner Bros. He almost appeared in a video game developed by War Gaming, the same people who have created World of Tanks, and has made a couple of crossovers with other mainstream characters such as Pinhead, Savage Dragon, The Mask, and almost but unfortunately cancelled crossover with Batman Patricide. And throughout all those years, throughout these countless offers to make money, to sell, moving from one publisher to another and everything, Pat Mills and Kevin O'Neill maintained the rights to the Marshal Law to this day. But some of you may still ask the question, what is Marshal Law? People see it just as another satirical work of superhero-hating edgy media, just as The Boys is, but now sprinkled with all anti-American message. And you will be not far from the truth, but you will be missing the entire point of the story if you're gonna treat it as just another edgy media that isn't worth the attention. Just as how people did with the Boys comic after the show's end, which led to people just straight up lying about the comic, as how Noir's plot twist came out of nowhere, or that the Butcher's gaff ends a self-insert, or that the comic is edgy for the sake of being edgy, and it just resulted in the Boys comic getting so much people LARPing the comic, it could just be as well equated to people LARPing Invincible and Flash comics. Because these same people don't know shit and just jerk off until they come blood to certain panels that are either complete bullshit or just to ostracize the book. Because the people that are comic book fans that read only superhero comics aren't ready for serious topics and just dismiss the plot and what the writer tried to say through their work, and coincidentally become ignorant because they can't read a comic with more mature topic that isn't saving a cat from the tree. And the main reason why people disliked Boys of the Garth Ennis and Mills Marshal Law was not just because they were so-called edgy, it's because they portrayed heroes flawed like humans, that they are not perfect reflection of humanity but part of it all along by being drug addicts, killers and rapists. And Marshal Law is a perfect representation of it, as Boys present these flawed heroes from a corporal viewpoint that they are nothing more but products, while Law presents these flawed heroes as propaganda for American agenda as war veterans unable to re-enter the society after the war. Whether you like it or not, Marshal Law is a classic and arguably more iconic and better than The Boys. In this video, I won't just discuss the story, its world and its meaning, but also its writer Pat Mills, his politics and the 20th century world. The first thing you have to know about the Pat Mills is that he hates superheroes. Nowadays, people mostly see Garth Ennis as the main hater of the superheroes, because of his multiple comments and because of his creation of The Boys. But the reality is, Garth Ennis doesn't hate superheroes. As a beginner reader might think, hell, he likes superheroes, as he have numerously praised superheroes as Superman, not just in interviews, but in 34th issue of Hitman. This so-called hate Ennis has is entirely based on the dislike on what direction the comic book industry takes, and it's pivoting onto superhero genre and not leaning any closer to the other way that isn't tied or even remotely close to superheroes. Ennis himself grew up reading war comics like Battle Picture Weekly. It kinda makes sense that he won't be too fond of superhero comic books. Like, just take a look at his bibliography, and if you have read his work before, he will include military served characters, or entire stories based on military and war, like War Stories, Johnny Red, Fury, Stitched, and more and more and more. The thing about Ennis is that his interests are tied to it. He likes military and war stories, and people have criticized him for it on Twitter and Reddit, and quite frankly, it's stupid to do it, because it's the same as criticizing Alan Moore for being into Lovecraft and magic, or when Frank Miller went insane after 9/11. Okay, maybe Miller is a little bit valid, but you get the point. But while Ennis's hatred for superheroes only roots in his interest in stories and how the industry just pivots too much into this genre and ignoring the other important comics genres, Pat Mills is entirely different than Garth, because his dislike and hate for superheroes is revolving around the idea and ideology of superhero beings being fundamentally fascistic and a tool of American propaganda to promote the American dream, United States agenda and power, as superheroes are quote-unquote metaphor for their superweapons. In his sense, superheroes were never used to fight against the system, to fight against the real injustice that an average citizen faces, with no criminal element like robbery, murder, and etc., but rather manipulation and brainwashing of the individual to do its bidding and influence the nation into its ideas. If you're gonna look into Marshal Law in this video, we're not just gonna have to go deep to know the writer Pat Mills and his politics, but also the history of comic books and the Cold War. And Pat Mills, if I'm gonna be honest, is the kind of man that deserves to have his own video in his own right. But I'm not gonna fucking do that. First off, not many will know Pat Mills, as the man haven't worked under Marvel or DC as much as the other British writers, but Pat worked under Marvel writing Punisher and creating both Punisher 2099 and Ravage 2099. But outside of the big two, he was the most influential man with British comics, specifically in his time when he worked in 2000 AD, where he created such characters as the Nemesis the Warlock, Slain, and ABC Warriors, all of which became quickly popular stories in the progs, with Nemesis specifically almost rivaling the same popularity as Judge Dredd. While reading his work, it becomes rather quickly apparent that the man has almost never written any superhero books. As I have already mentioned, Pat's opinion on superheroes is the other side of the coin to rather more popular with mainstream writer Garth Ennis, as superheroes in his sense are just a tool of propaganda by the American government to represent not just its imperialism or to other nations in the Cold War, when going open conflict with USSR will just be suicide to the entire world we knew, but to the idea of American dream and the superiority of supposed American culture. Why do you think many Americans on the internet talk about and show Iran before the Islamic Revolution, or why many movies and media show off the places that are not similar to theirs in negative light, or like how John Wayne's Green Berets portrays South Vietnam as the good guys and practically people have similar clothing and hairstyles as 60s America? For it's the idea of the perfect society, not just the American conservatives photo, but as well the government that only see countries that fit their image, will abide and listen to, rather than the people who have different language, different culture and religion. Their world is a world with no culture. Cold War was a war of ideologies to prove which one was more reliant and superior, and even though many say that US won the Cold War since the Soviet Union dissolved, but then why Vietnam stayed? Why Cuba stayed? Why China stayed to be the global power that scares the American government that imposed tariffs and sanctions upon? Cold War is not over yet, and it still rages on. Pat Mills was born on 1949 year and seen for himself how United States act and how people are willing to pay money to watch the propaganda to be inspired and brainwashed, especially with Ronald Reagan and Vietnam. And that's where the book Marshal Law comes in. For the law is not just a hate book on superheroes, it's not just commentary on how superheroes are inherently based on conservative ideas, patriarchal and actively promoting it, but a commentary on imperialism of USA and of the Vietnam conflict. Now, before I continue shortly, I gotta say that I agree that maybe the opinion of superheroes is kinda outdated because of both social and political environment has changed and turned regular old fascism we fought against World War II as a necessity. Much as how Confederacy lost Civil War, but has won cultural war for the ideals and traditions were passed down to children in schools and entertainment, resulting in segregation, Ku Klux Klan, and enslaving of black men. And it's as much of a case as how it is with Frederick Wertham's book Seduction of the Innocent, facts to whom influence have made comic books public eye a sinful creation to turn kids into homosexuals, feminists, and abandon the conservative ideas and worship Satan. That is why we had Comics Code, but thankfully we stopped, but because we stopped having one thing, many other ideas are still being intact. Okay, so Martial Law, what is it again? Ah, yes. Comic book about superhero cop arresting other superheroes. The thing you gotta know about Marshal Law, aka Joe Gilmore, is just a superhero like any other he has arrested. Before being a Marshal Law, Joe was another superhero named Screaming Eagle in the Zone, South American conflict that include Panama, Ecuador, Brazil, and Venezuela. The conflict happened as the United States developed its own superhumans with the help of Dr. Shock, because of whom created America's greatest hero, their greatest tool for manipulation, named Public Spirit, alongside with his fiancée Virago. These superhumans were created through the operation of women's embryos. South America started the same experimentation and procedures following US success with it, especially Venezuela, with its entire 14 million population having their intelligence enhanced. But due to poverty of the South American countries, the enhanced super people saw Marxism and communism as the only solution to the poverty and made US act upon it, as Dr. Shock convinced them to, and following the war have enhanced volunteers. Thanks to Public Spirit, who practically became the icon of the United States since his first public appearance, following his expedition to the stars, and the timing in which started alongside with the conflict had inspired countless men to volunteer into the conflict, becoming superheroes in the war, thanks to Shock, and Joe Gilmore was one of them alongside countless men like Suicida and McGland. And the war was brutal, and driving the volunteer men crazy with power they were given, and the war seemed to have no definitive ending to it until it was just over, with no clear winner in sight, and the people who became heroes came back crazy, no longer what they were supposed to be. For they now found only comfort in combat and violence. A normal life of peace and them no death is no longer familiar to them, and Martial Law was one of them, but instead he was a man that wasn't broken and instead reborn for what he saw in the zone and sees now in the civilian life, and now hired by the government to keep them in check. Just as like many young men who have volunteered to Vietnam because of propaganda they have consumed cannot bring the old life they had, their minds ruined by the violence they imposed on innocent lives on their own, broken and plagued by the memories and PTSD. Abandoned by the government they served, and instead of saving them and helping to get back on their feet, put in psychiatric hospitals and left to fend for themselves. And that is all because of the Public Spirit, greatest superhero of America, the greatest propaganda. Public Spirit, for what he is and what is in your head comes up with, he is not a parody of Superman, or a copy of Captain America, or even the original Homelander. No, Public Spirit is inspired by John Wayne and Ronald Reagan, for they are the reason why American society is so twisted and broken, for they have manipulated people, separated people into different groups, into different races more, made people more broke, and individuals more richer. Just give me a good cause and there ain't nothing I can't lick. The adapted line of public spirit from John Wayne himself that instead says just give the American people a good cause and there ain't nothing they can lick. John Wayne and Ronald Reagan both were actors, but with John Wayne is more important to the character, for he and Spirit put up the act. They act in front of the American people for their entertainment and to inspire. Wayne was a popular actor for his western films, but what has inspired Pat Mills's public spirit and John Wayne is his movie Green Berets. For the movie is a pure propaganda piece to promote the US involvement in Vietnamese war and South Vietnamese cause. The movie of which, being a little entertaining, has influenced many young Americans into volunteering to the war, just as how Public Spirit being the greatest superhero going into the space and influencing many young men to become superheroes. Green Berets was quite frankly ridiculous, racist and xenophobic movie for presenting South Vietnam as the good guys and the Viet Cong as bad ruthless guys, when in reality the situation South Vietnamese and the US Army have caused so much misery and suffering with the war crimes, it wasn't even hardly a secret before Wayne's movie came out. For 1966, US was found guilty with the act of aggression, with torture, napalm, gassing, sexual violence and genocide. And just as it happened, the same year as it was released, May He Lay massacre occurred on 18th May of 1968, where approximately 504 civilians were killed from Son My village, including the fact that female victims old as were caused by the US soldiers. The movie tries to represent as the good guys. And I'm not even mentioning that South Vietnamese side has conducted one of the most brutal prison camps where they kept prisoners in barbed wire cages and put them through torture. And as much as how the movie loves to represent Viet Cong as bastards and South Viet as the racist caricatures of civilians, Viet Cong consisted of regular people, the regular people who had normal life with families. That is considered when they lived under French occupation as a colony, and the South Vietnam were the remains of the said European oppression, that their nation was stolen by a white man, and Ho Chi Minh presented independency, freedom from the oppressors. Just as how much the people from the zone wanted to live in better conditions than what their nations were in. US soldiers were abandoned, just as how the superheroes from the zone were abandoned, and how after the Great One earthquake was the part of San Futuro abandoned to the superheroes, becoming their turf. And Ronald Reagan for how he manipulated the public. For when he was younger, he was an actor as well, but due to outside influence, he promoted conservative ideas to sell to the American citizens and make certain individuals richer when he was a president. That's how Spirit made them believe into him, into what government wants them to believe and buy, just to make people like Shock more richer. Marshal Law represents both not only resentment against the superhero genre and its ideal version of a man that is unrealistic in its nature, but also the big anti-US statement as how United States abused not just the minds of ordinary folk that live normal lives with their families, but also the American dream, which is entirely built on individualistic personal gain of wealth. The government abused it to make the ordinary man to do its bidding by using propaganda in many ways. Movies, comics, real-life entertainment, how the American dream perverted people's view into reality. And as well how the public spirit is the ideal American dream incarnate, but that's what he all is, an image. For behind the picture is a twisted, broken man. He cannot be the man that the nation needs him to be, a Superman. He tries to be him by taking steroids, by attending events and promoting ideals and taking Q&As. He killed his own fiancée to be the image that the nation wants him to be. A strong image to show how the nation and its people are strong and incapable to show his flaws and weakness. Conquering stars, no more slums, rescuing a nun, rescuing a dog, rescuing an orphan, a job well done. He protects the weak, but the weak is the weaker sex, the female, never another man, never the same sex that is weaker than him in terms of muscles, but only used as into saving the female from the abusive partner or stopping the robbery or murder. It is to protect the image of the strong man protecting weak women. That is the image that the comic book industry is imposing as the people like Frederick Wertham imagine comics to be and try to fight against. This so-called internalized homosexuality now replaced with internalized homophobia. So they will continue to exist and they adapt the conservative ways. They reject homosexuality, feminism, and make characters more manly and turn feminist characters into bastardized versions of themselves than what the original creator intended them to be. The fear of inferiority. And his own son, Sleeper Man, could be both a reflection of Bertham's idea of superheroes and the result of the American dream. The filth, the disgust, the bacteria. But as I asked Pat Mills the question about him in the email, he said that he was based on someone he knew. As I have already stated, Marshal Law represents both the resentment against the superhero genre, its big anti-US statement, and the lies of American dream that in turn ruin people's lives by destroying their psyche and their perception of reality. In the end, you can say what you want, but you can't deny the fact that none of it won't change despite how hard you try, because there will always be one writer that will meet status quo and be praised for it. Home for Christmas, After the Battle, Destroying a Dog, Siamese Twins, Super Roulette, Shock Treatment. As optimism about the future gives way to pessimism, so hero is replaced by the anti-hero. Of them all, the most brutal is Marshal Law, with razor slashes down each cheek, looking as if his throat's being cut, his costume deliberately designed to be the exact opposite of the public spirits. He is public spirit's nemesis, the sun hero's dark twin, just as Nemesis is believed to have caused the extinction of the dinosaurs, so he deals with heroes whose time has gone. He is the Dark Star. For his costume openly advertising his hardness, such a man seems incapable of gentleness, of love. And yet there are contradictions. Is the barbed wire wrapped around his arm a sign of sadomasochistic practices, or of a subconscious desire to be punished for his past crimes? Only time will tell what kind of a role model he will be. But if the past belongs to the public spirit, the future belongs to the Marshal Law.